Okay, good evening, everyone. I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. Um, as we are, it's just now 6 o'clock, so we're going to allow some time for others to join in. But I want to just start some introductions. My name is Kareem Scales, and I am the Administrator of Operations with the Greater Grand Rapids NAACP. And I'm also a member of the Greater Grand Rapids NAACP Environmental Justice Committee, who is bringing you today's event. So as I stated, we want to allow some time for others to join in on the stream. So we'll maybe give it a couple more minutes. We do want this to be an interactive conversation. So it'll be less of a traditional panel where we really want to hear from community, and we want to engage with community throughout the next hour. So as we get started, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the comments, and we will address those as we start the conversation. So we will get started shortly. Again, thanks everyone for joining tonight. Again, we are just waiting for others to join in on the stream. We will get started promptly at approximately 6:03. I just want to give some time for others to join. Again, welcome to NAACP Environmental Justice Committee's part one of our four-part series, which is titled Getting to Know in the 4950's. So we'll I'll dive in a little deeper about what that means and why we've decided to host this here momentarily. But again, thank everyone for joining, and we'll get started shortly. All right, we have a good amount of people in, so I'd say we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thanks everybody for coming out. My name is Kareem Scales. For those of you who just joined, I am the Administrator of Operations with the Greater Grand Rapids branch of the NAACP. And I'm excited, I'm pumped up, glad to bring today's event to you all. I think it's a very important conversation that is long overdue to be had. We want to, provide some education awareness to some of these issues that have unfortunately plagued our communities for some time. So with that said, I wanted to give a little background on the NAACP Environmental Justice Committee, kind of when we started and kind of what our approach is as we engage in this work in the community. So NAACP Environmental Justice Committee started approximately, going on almost 2 years ago. And President Jackson and I joke about this sometime. It feels like we were kind of thrown into this space. So the national organization had reached out to President Jackson, I think it was toward the end of 2019, and presented him with an opportunity, and our branch with an opportunity to engage in some workshops and training at with the national organization. So we visited a training in Washington, D.C., and another one in Baltimore. And wow, when we came back, it was just like we had been overwhelmed with all of this different information about how these environmental hazards unfortunately disproportionately impact communities that we live and serve in. So we wanted to come back fired up and educate our community on what these issues are, and not only just talk about it, but advocate for some real strategic change in this space. With that said, we came back and we launched our committee. We kicked that off, our first engagement. We partnered with the Sierra Club, as well as the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, where we hosted Aaron Mayer here at the center. Aaron was the previous president and the first African-American president of the Sierra Club. And that was kind of our I would say, launch into this space. Fast forward to today, what we decided to do is we wanted to develop a live stream series where we would talk to community and engage with community on specific issues. And the topic for today's conversation is going to be food injustice. So I'm excited to have an illustrious panel of amazing women as we celebrate Women's Month. I'm excited to have all these women share their perspective and talk about this very important topic. With that said, before we get started, I want to bring on President Jackson of the Greater Grand Rapids NAACP, just to share a few words with you all, kind of about, again, giving a little bit more background about how we got engaged in this space and what our plans are moving forward. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to President Jackson. Cleo.
I'm here, Kareem. I want to thank you for pulling this together and our exciting group of panelists tonight. And thank you for actually taking time out of your schedule at this hour to talk about, food injustice, which is directly related to environmental injustices that we face every day. I want to give a little context as well. Kareem did a great job. It's amazing how time flies. I was thinking about when we attended the environmental justice convening, and I was trying to think, like, when did we attend that? The first one was basically in the DC area, and then we attended another one, the second one in Baltimore. And that really just kind of started the spark, right? And that really was the introduction for the Grand Rapids branch to really kind of focus on, environmental and climate justice, and just getting trained on some of these. What are some of the issues specifically related to the area of environmental and climate justice? So was super excited to be able to do that and to engage in that training network, and then kind of bring that back here locally. And one of I think the results of that, we decided to go ahead and activate this environmental justice committee under the NAACP of Greater Grand Rapids branch. And so I'm super excited that you guys are hosting these forums, and I think, as you said, Kareem, it'll be quarterly, right? So super excited. There are some brilliant minds, not only here locally, you'll hear from tonight, but across this country. I'm hoping that you guys will bring some of those folks on. And when you look at especially our sister Jacqueline Patterson, who's just dope, phenomenal, who heads up our entire environmental and climate justice department and team at the NAACP National Office. So I'll give you just a little bit of a timeline to add to Kareem. So like in 2009, basically, the first NAACP delegation to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference was held basically in Copenhagen. And then in 2010, the launch of the Gulf oil drilling disaster campaign, which consisted of releasing a report, the BP oil drilling disaster NAACP investigative report. And that report detailed basically our findings, and again, the global impact on this environmental catastrophe. And then in 2011, the launch of our Equity and Emergency Management Initiative, which was really a response to the experience of the 2010 crisis of the BP oil drilling disaster. And then 2012, we launched this report out of the national office titled Cold Blooded. And it really was I would say, I think a groundbreaking campaign that named pollution from coal plants really as a civil rights issue. And I believe at some point, I know when we were in Baltimore, we had talked about, basically an updated addition to the cold-blooded report. And so I think that'll probably happen at some point in the future. And then in 2013, the launch of our leadership initiative on strengthening diversity and inclusion, and really organizing, I think, which is really amazing, across partner agencies around these issues that, as we all know, disproportionately impact not only the Black communities, but also other communities of color and low wealth and poor white communities. And so then in 2014, there was the launch of our Just Energy campaign, which really paved the way for the alternative to coal, oil and gas burning, to generating energy, while also incorporating principles and practices of economic justice and democracy, which is often sometimes referred to as just this whole just transitioning, looking at where are the economic opportunities in terms of jobs and skills, and how do we develop those sorts of things. So the list goes on and on and on and on. And then in 2018, everyone knows the NAACP was, significantly involved in the Flint water crisis campaign. And so, and still did, a number of things around that, with rallying the community in Flint and across the state of Michigan to address that. And unfortunately, I think that's an issue that's still being dealt with in terms of making sure that, our brothers and sisters in Flint have clean water. But it's interesting, not only in Flint, as a result of what happened in Flint, we've since learned that, and I think probably many of us do, that there has been a issue with just having clean water in a variety of communities across this country, and not just Flint. One of the things that is really interesting to me is that I realized in kind of going through and becoming, I guess, a little more educated in school and this whole environmental and climate justice piece, is that race is the number one indicator for the placement of toxic facilities in this country. And so, and we know those things, those toxins impact, asthma rates, issues around lung, other respiratory illnesses. And so this is real. This is a real issue. And unfortunately, I think at times when it comes to, especially the Black community and other communities of color, the devastating effects of environmental injustice and climate injustice is not really lifted up. And so, again, I'm just super excited that all of you are starting this environmental forum. I know there are so many different pieces, so many things that we are engaged in, even right now in the middle of a pandemic, where, we have over 500,000 people that have lost their lives, and moving to, it looks like, it's almost 550, I believe. And so dealing with that, and then the rollout of the vaccines, but I always say to folks that we have to remember that COVID is not the only injustice that we're dealing with. So we still have to be diligent and focus on all of these other issues as well, and keep a spotlight on those, and ensuring that we're addressing those issues. And as we saw, which I think actually is kind of poetic that you're having this conversation around food injustice, right? Because we know that many, many, many individuals and families throughout this pandemic has been significantly dealing with the issue around food insecurity and lack of access. Because, as Kareem, we've hosted several givebacks, and have distributed thousands of pounds of food to individuals and families. So that's a real issue. So I'm excited that you're hosting this, because it all is, I think it intersects on some level, right? And so very interested to hear what our sisters got to say tonight, the panelists, about this issue around food injustice and all things environmental. So thank you for having me tonight. And I actually took the plunge, so I got my juice, and I was vaccinated today. So that's been interesting too. So it's been a very interesting day.
That's good, man. Thank you, President Jackson, for joining, man. I think it's good that you provide that background context, kind of from a organizational perspective, and then even give background on our branches to kind of the global perspective, how we engage in this space. But now here's the cool part. Now I'm extremely excited to dive into the conversation now. And Clea, I'd like, if you could, to stick around and feel free to jump in throughout the conversation. But what I want to do now is I want to bring on our panelists, who I'm extremely excited to have. I will bring them on, allow them to introduce themselves, and then we'll just dive right into the questions. Again, I want this to be more of a free-flowing conversation, as opposed to like this really structured presentation. We want this to be open to community. Want to hear from you all, and also hear from our amazing panelists. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring them on now. All right. Good evening, ladies.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all for joining. What we'll do is I'll just go ahead and pass it around roundabout and allow everyone to introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the conversation. So why don't we just go in order? I'll just start off with you, Crystal. Feel free to introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Crystal Scott Tunstall. I am a member of the NAACP Environmental and Justice Committee. I am also a professor at GVSU in Environmental Sustainability Studies.
Thank you for that. And I will then pass it to Eleanor.
Good evening, friends. I'm Eleanor Moreno. I get the honor and privilege, 9 to 5, the director of the Cook Arts Center for Granville Avenue Arts and Humanities, but have historically played across the city, across the county, in a lot of different food justice roles. I currently sit in the forming team for the Food Policy Council, which will hopefully be launching here in April. Also was the co-chair for the Food and Nutrition Coalition for the Essential Needs Task Force, and have done a lot of advocacy and justice work around food systems. So I'm really excited to be on this panel with these really beautiful humans.
Thank you, Eleanor. And we will then go ahead and pass it to Alita. Introduce yourself.
Hi there, Alita Kelly, founder of Southeast Market, a grocery store and food hub that just opened on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. My background has been in managing nutrition programs through local nonprofits. And last year, I just finished up my degree in environmental science and sustainable business from U of M. So I'm returning and trying out this market and trying to embed some security within our southeast side around food and environmental justice.
Thank you all, ladies, for joining. Again, I've had the pleasure of working with you all, and you all of you do amazing work in the community. So I want to commend you for not only taking the time out to be involved with this tonight, but for all that you do outside of tonight. It's much appreciated. But let's jump right in. Here's what we're here for today. Let's jump into the conversation. The first question is, as we already know, I think Clee kind of spoke to it. Unfortunately, Black and brown and low wealth, poor white communities are plagued with this lack of quality access to food. And I want to just ask you all, in your opinion, and in this order, what would you say are the top 3 things that either local, state, or federal government could do to help alleviate this problem? And I'll let anyone who feels comfortable to go ahead and jump in and get started. So again, just to rephrase the question, just want to know, in your opinion, what are some of the things that we can ask for our local government, state government, or federal government to do to help with our food injustice issues that we face?
Well, some things that I think that local government can do is get more involved with allowing green space for our growers, especially growers of color, to allow people more security and also more sovereignty with their food. I think they should invest more in open spaces like food forests where people can go and harvest for free and encourage the use of those spaces.
That's a good one, Chris. I know that we have there's a lot of people I'm sure are familiar with urban roots right here on Madison. Is that kind of where you're talking about, or is that not necessarily what you was just speaking of?
No, I'm speaking more of an edible space where it would be like a park where people are free to come and go as they want, harvest as they want, and it's maintained by local municipality. So it's supported by the local government, but everyone is welcome to just come and harvest. So it would be a food forest. So you would have trees, bushes, things that are edible, fruits, nuts, vegetables.
And I believe there are some communities that have already, been successful with implementing these. I believe, isn't there something like this already going on in Chicago, Crystal?
There are some community garden spaces in Chicago, some that I have worked with, but also places like Washington, D.C., Seattle, those are places that have gone ahead and started these food forests or edible landscapings that people in the community can access for free with just a come in and go as you please. But it is maintained by the local municipality. So maybe the local park district, so to speak.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a big one. Accessibility is, I'm sure we'll hear that term come up several more times in our conversation. But ladies, Alita or Eleanor, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper into what Crystal was just saying. I want yes, all of that, but also just thinking from a local policy side, the limitations we have as a system or as a city, where growers can't grow in the front of their yards because back in the 50s we thought that clean cut grass was the thing, and that got really popular, and it just kind of has been that way. And so for grass to be cut to 2-3 inches, that just doesn't make sense anymore. So now we have all of these quote unquote beautiful green lawns when really we should be growing on them for those who have those spaces. And even thinking about some of our food organizations who have green space and can't build greenhouses because of again, those really kind of silly policies saying, well, no, you can't, and you can't compost, and you can't have bees. And there's just all of these different policies that limit in the way that we can create that accessibility, because I'm going to start using that word in everything I say now, and just kind of limit us in the way we do food, anywhere from growing it with a greenhouse to recycling it with composting. There's just a lot of limitations that within the city and really any municipality has just kind of created to kind of block in the way we kind of think about our connection to the earth. I think if we think about it at a bigger kind of governmental level, just thinking about how Black and Brown community, we don't have that ability to access those grants. It's not even worth it. It's not even worth it to us anymore to search and be a part of it, because things are just way too expensive. Those grants don't allow the flexibility we need to grow, to start, to sustain ourselves. You know, being a farmer, you can't live off of that, sadly. As much as we want to, as much as I think about it every other day of like, I'm just gonna quit my job and I'm just gonna grow food. Like I can't sustain myself financially to do it, even though I would love to.
Oh, that's a good one. So I think that one, what you spoke to, Eleanor, really touches on the local level, and some things that could be changed here locally. But go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah, so I totally agree with both of you ladies. Crystal and I both sit on the Urban Agriculture Committee for the City of Grand Rapids. And so we're doing a lot of work around policy and how to shift policy at the local level to really empower people to grow. And there are community gardens, but I think what Crystal is talking about that's so powerful and different is really holding the city and entities of government accountable to the longevity of something like a community garden. Because when you're talking about a place like Urban Roots, you mentioned, Urban Roots is a nonprofit. And so I'm not sure if it's their model for just anyone to come in and just start picking from their soil. So I think that really empowering some long-lasting policy that supports access in public spaces is the move.
No, thank you. Yeah.
Can I pick back up on that?
Sure. Go ahead.
I think the problem is just awareness on all the different levels, from the municipal level to the homeowner. For example, with a homeowner, Eleanor talked about these beautiful lawns that are, so many inches high. And yes, they bring value to your home. They bring this aesthetic value. But what most homeowners don't realize is that planting an edible landscape can also bring aesthetic value to your property as well, and then also help feed your community. The fact that you're growing this monoculture of lawn takes a lot of fertilizer, it takes a lot of water, and it ends up hurting the environment. When you could substitute that for an edible landscaping that could help, like I said, feed the community, but also help the environment as well. So I think we just need some more awareness all the way around as well.
And I think if I could jump in here too, I think we have to make it simple and easy for folks as well, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think I remember growing up, my dad is from Louisiana, and so and they lived off the land for a large part of his life, and they grew their own food, and really, I guess in a sense, even when they did meat, it was processed in what I would consider probably a very organic manner, because they had to do that, right? So when growing up, we always had a garden here in the city of Grand Rapids. In our backyard, we always pretty much had a garden. And but I think it is, you have to make it simple and easy and educate people, because I really didn't even think about that when I heard, I think Eleanor talking about the green space, kind of the grass around the house, quite honestly, when you think of that, you think, "Ooh, I don't want an edible garden in my front yard," right? And so, but it's how do you position that as a piece of beauty and conversation, though, but also looking at, there's a lot of space on the side of houses in the city, in the backyards, that can really have a significant amount of green space to grow those fresh foods. So I just think it's just about education and awareness, and really the city investing time and resources into that.
Oh, thanks everyone for your comments. I think with that said, that'll be actually a perfect segue, I think, into the next question. And I think this one is more so an assumption, but I want to hear everyone else's comments. You know, I think there's an assumption out there that historically our communities, i.e. Black, Brown, and low wealth communities, have no desire to eat or live a healthier lifestyle. So I wanted to engage in that part of the conversation. I think some people would say that's a myth, or some people would say that that's a direct reflection of accessibility, you know, that we keep talking about. But I want to hear from you all, you know, what are some things, you know, if you do agree with that, what are some things that you think we can do as community to help change that narrative? Or, you know, if you don't agree with it, maybe just speak to, you know, maybe why that myth exists.
I think that the lack of accessibility of fresh and healthy foods in our neighborhoods has begun to shift our food culture. So it's not that we don't want these foods and we don't like these foods, it's we've been separated from these foods for so long. So now our food culture looks different. And we're going to have to work really hard to get back to the place to eating the foods that our ancestors ate, like okra and crowder peas. You know, that's a part of our heritage. And so part of what I like to do, especially with children, is talk about what do your grandparents like to eat, and sort of like get them familiar and to have ownership and pride of the fresh, healthy foods that are part of their history. But I think it's really just comes down to a culture shift because of lack of accessibility.
I really like the word you used, Alita, in terms of separation, like this disconnect that we've kind of created for ourselves as a civilization. As like if we, you know, think about like the timeline y'all had started with at the beginning of like, you know, when SNAP started, when the Depression started, you know, this rally for like how do we support community was like, let's get everyone non-perishable food, and that just became our staple. And it just kind of continued because we didn't have, you know, lack of a lot of different things during that time frame, and that just kind of continued. And so that separation to the earth, that separation to the land, that separation to you know, food that's growing from the earth, just kind of has continued. And what does it look like for us to kind of like take hold of that again and create that connection back to our ancestors, to create that connection back to our grandmas and grandpas, and really look at like our relationship to the land. I really appreciated what Crystal was saying earlier of like, you know, food, how connected in the way that we engage in food, and how that connects to the environment. If we think about like what's found in our neighborhood, you know, there's probably 4 or 5 fast food restaurants, and hopefully maybe like a good enough store that has fruits and vegetables. But really, you know, we have liquor stores, we have those corner stores, and that's just not enough anymore. But that's just kind of what we've sadly been dealt with.
No, go ahead.
Betrayal. I was going to say, I think betrayal doesn't help either. I think ethnic foods have been portrayed as an unhealthy foods, like soul food being all about fried chicken, and not the fact that collard greens are a vegetable. So I think portrayal of ethnic foods, especially in the media, has not helped our relationship with food either.
That's a really good one, Crystal. I think, like I said, I think there's a lot of assumptions that just end up lingering out there if we don't speak to it like we're doing here. So I think everyone hit it right on the head. Clee, did you have anything you wanted to share on that one, or any thoughts as it relates to the question around eating and leading a healthier lifestyle and helping change that narrative?
Well, you know, I guess my response or reaction will be, whose report are you really going to believe, right? And so, you know, there are a lot of different, I think, myths or, you know, uneducated thoughts or conversations when it comes to, especially communities of color. But, I think the bottom line is we have to understand that, people, people will do what they must do to survive, right? And so and unfortunately, there have been things that have been put in place from a systems and institutional perspective that has really caused this whole issue, I think, around, access and affordability. I mean, the fact is, what is amazing to me, people, I get it, when you talk about corner stores, and there's so many, and that's right, it is. But we have to, the reality of the fact is that the corner stores were never, their business model was never to be a healthy store or green grocer. If we want to be honest, hey, they were created for people to go in and get some pork skins, some Cheetos, some hot Cheetos, some liquor, some other things. They weren't created for people to go in and grab fresh fruits and veggies. And so I think that's an infrastructure problem that we have to deal with, and we have to demand that, okay, there has to be community investment in these areas to build a Southeast market. There has to be community investment in these areas to put a Bridge Street market right in our community. And so we have choice and we have variety. And that's really what has to happen. I'm looking at all of these different apartment complexes and different things like that happening. And then right now, right here in the city, I'm talking about in the urban core, and then you have these spaces on the bottom, and they're putting these, small businesses in here, right? But what about being intentional and saying, we're going to put an anchor grocer in here, maybe an Aldi's or someone else, where we can have even more choice. And then we're going to figure out, how do we support and build out this, Alita store, the Southeast market? How do we build that out? How do we scale that to a level where there is no issue of access and affordability, right? And how do we support that? And the deal is this: we have the resources. I'm tired of also people talking about the lack of resources. We have the resources, and so I think about it on a county level, on a city level. You think about, when. And this should have been really top of mind for both the county and the city when they received, $100+ million through COVID. And one of the number one things that we saw people serving with or affected by was food insecurity. So you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So you mean we can't take 20 million and invest in a couple brick and mortar stores, or invest in a Southeast market and expand that to prepare for the next wave to come? So those are the conversations. I believe that we have to maximize our own green space. I'm all about that. I'm totally about it. But I also believe that we have to invest in the infrastructure in the urban core in order to have a variety of different options. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you for saying all of that. I appreciate the affirmation too of some of the work that we're doing at Southeast Market. I think part of all this money that came in from COVID, like you were speaking on, it's so reactionary and it doesn't really speak into the long-term vision of support.
Yeah.
So we really gotta start thinking about, how are we gonna support people after COVID's over, or what, after this crisis right now. And so I hope that we can figure out how to build this model that is scalable, but we are going to need the community support. because, you know, we're looking at Meijer and places like Aldi, who do have this economy of scale. And so it really takes grassroots and people that are invested in the long-term, a positive health impact for our local community, for a place like Southeast Market to thrive.
That's true. That's true. I am. There's one comment in the comments by Leonard Eisen. He says he's a grass farmer. So, and then Susan says that Kent County MSU Extension has sponsored neighborhood gardens.
That's great to know.
Yeah, and I think that's great, but I'm not sure if there is enough. You know, you don't really see, and I think more importantly too, during COVID, one of the things that I noticed, MSU, first of all, MSU Extension has some amazing programs, I think, in terms of where, you know, members in community can access. I think most of them are free or very low cost, and they had a program around gardening and growing your own food. And so I think too, you know, while we've essentially had a year to kind of just exhale, and unfortunately, in because of this pandemic, but what that also has, I think, allowed all of us, young and old, is to really take stock into some of the things that we actually have to do to create sustainability and resiliency for ourselves. Because I tell people often, all the times as well, you know, the Lone Ranger is not coming to save us. So we have to really understand how do we save ourselves. And then the other piece about it, Alita, you spoke to, you know, this pandemic, and the pandemic will actually be reduced at some point. We don't know how long. Hopefully sooner than later, to an endemic, right? And so, but this pandemic is going to have long-term impact on everything we knew. And so, yeah, so I think there, you know, it will take some serious commitment from not only, as Kareem was mentioning earlier, but I think local government, state government, and federal government. I know, Alita, you mentioned that you're on this, you're working with the city. I think you're on a committee.
Yeah.
Is there, or do any, and this is for any of you, is there a comprehensive food security policy that the city has or the county has that you know of?
No.
No, there's not one.
So that would be really interesting to make that, and I'm going to say not request, but demand that there be a comprehensive, because here's the deal. We've seen it. We've all had a front row seat during this pandemic. I mean, we served hundreds and hundreds of families. And people, this is the other deal. There were people that participated and received food that did not fit the normal profile, which was very interesting to me. And so clearly that suggests that this is something that we really got to get a grip on, and sooner rather than later. And we have to pull out everything.
Hey, no, thanks for that, Clea. And my apologies, everyone. I had some technological issues here. I got disconnected, but thanks for keeping the conversation going. I wanted to speak to kind of something that you just brought up, Clea. At some point, as we prepare to conclude the conversation, about 10 minutes or so, I did want to bring on an additional guest, Janelle Van Der Griff, who is with the Essential Needs Task Force. She's been tasked with being the Kent County Food Policy Coordinator. So maybe we can engage or hear from her and maybe ask her those questions around food policy. But to continue the conversation here, if we can, I want to jump into the next question, which I think is, again, a perfect segue from the last question. As we talk about kind of, what we're asking of our government from a state, local, and a federal level, I want to shift it to more personal. What can we do as individuals, businesses, and institutions within our community to address this food injustice issue? So pretty much the same question, just looking at it through a different lens, specifically individuals, businesses, and institutions. And anyone, feel free to jump in.
Oh, Alita, rock, paper, scissors, you. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna speak into our personal choices around food. It's not just about food access, it's about the sustainability of the food that we're deciding to engage with. And so something that I'm really passionate about is sourcing locally and from diverse farms when possible. And so the small farms, regenerative farms like the ones that we work with at Southeast Market, they have a smaller footprint than these larger farms that are supplying huge stores. So I think from a personal level, know where your food is coming from. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Get curious about what type of system you're a part of and see if it really resonates with your values.
Mm-hmm.
All yes. And I saw Leonard post about, again, about his grass farming. And Leonard, what does it look like for you to get some free seeds from KDL? Every year they have free heirloom seeds, and you just plant one, grow one plant, and then go to the farmer's market, go to the Southeast Market, and buy from some of our local farmers to decrease that footprint. Because all we got to do is try and learn and fail and learn some more, and continue learning and growing. And I think that's from like one simple thing, or that low-hanging fruit. What does it look like all of us to grow one thing? And when we have too much, we share with our neighbor or we share with our coworker, and start creating a system of building that relationship to one another again, and start like, we all talk about food. We're all taking selfies. We're all posting that sweet lunch or dinner we just bought. But what does it look like that we're growing it ourselves? This year is my first year. I'm gonna do some chickens in my yard. I'm scared. I'm excited. I'm scared because I don't know what I'm doing, but I just want to learn. I want to learn and be kind of part of this ecosystem for myself and for my neighbors. And I'm excited to get my first egg. I'm excited to have, these little baby chickens running around my house and in my yard, and probably my neighbors yelling at me because they're too much and I'm too much. But what does it look like for all of us to just try one new plant, try one new vegetable, and start that relationship with a farmer?
I agree with all of that. I also think we need a little more education for the everyday consumer. Teaching them about being a locavore. What does it mean to eat locally? Letting them know that this includes eating in season because you live in Michigan. Letting them know that it also may include you preserving your food at harvest time, but putting more education around what it means to be a locavore will help a lot too.
Totally agree with that. One thing that I found it hard to figure out just as a person getting to know the system is, where is this place where you have all of the resources in one spot? Like, we have to make it easy for people and remove barriers to learning, having resources around like seeds. And one thing that I'm excited to try is to have our store or, places where people buy food have all these resources for them to engage with them around, seeds. And one thing that we're going to do this summer is be growing at MLK Park. We're really trying to empower our MLK Freedom School, which the NAACP has been such a huge supporter of. We're working with the Parks Department to get a few boxes up at MLK Park. And it's not just for us, it's for anyone that's there. And then the overflow or whatever's, falling off and needs to be picked and given to the community, it goes to Southeast Market and you can get that food there. So that's one like very community tied way that we can educate people around food and provide the physical food that they need within a community and engaging urban agriculture at the same time. So I'm really excited to see how that works.
Yes, also finding out what's in your community. So we know that Alita is on the southeast side. We also have places like New City Neighbors that is in the Creston neighborhood where you could go and meet the farmer who grew your food and buy shares. And they take food assistance to help people, not only just for the shares, but also for their plants and their plant sales. So they're trying to empower people, not just to buy their produce, but also to grow their own produce. So it's about empowering people to have some control and some security within their own food system. I've seen so many people be interested since COVID in backyard gardening and canning, and they're just running around like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to figure out what to do because they want to secure their food. So the time is now to look at what resources are in your community that you can tap into. Maybe you're not a grower. Maybe you don't have a green thumb. I've heard people tell me all the time, my thumbs are brown. Okay, fine. Maybe you have a yard around your house and you can loan that yard to a grower that you know so that they can grow food. And maybe you have an agreement that you're going to give some away and you're going to keep some, and then you're going to help a couple of other neighbors out with some food. It's all about tapping into the resources that is in your community.
I think everyone hit that right on the head. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm just extremely happy to see all of your faces in this conversation. We've all been a part of this work in different rooms, and too often does it not reflect what I see today. So I just want to say how happy I am to see this conversation happening in our own community and being controlled and where we can control the narrative. So this is like, we can keep going. It seems like an hour will fly by, but I think we're just scratching the surface of this conversation, really. But what I want to do really quick, to be respectful for all of our guests, I'd like to just kind of run through some of the comments. We don't have many questions, but I just want to acknowledge all the comments. We have Miss Linda Jones, who's the president of the Grand Rapids Food Co-op Initiative. She joined. She was one of our first joiners. Thanks for joining, Ms. Jones. As Eleanor spoke to Mr. Leonard Eisen, who is actually a member of the NAACP Executive Committee. He says, I'm a grass farmer. So he's one of those people who has a brown thumb, it sounds like. We have Miss Susan Alsberg, who put in a comment. She says, Kent County MSU Extension has sponsored neighborhood gardens. So that might be something to look into as we're talking about what we can do as community and looking for partners in this space. Kent County MSU Extension is an organization that helps sponsor this work. Leona Dunn says her great-grandfather told her a long time ago that he ate chitlins because when he was sharecropping, that's all they got was one pig a month, and they had to make use of every part of the pig. And we've heard that story. I'm sure all of us probably have heard a similar story from a grandmother or someone in the family. So thanks for bringing that up, Leona. She talked about a lack of resources that led to a family tradition. When we talk about, I think she's speaking to kind of the choice of foods and that part of the conversation. Keep going. Grand Rapids Food Co-op, working to bring a great grocery store owned by us to our neighborhood. We can own our own grocery store together and have it meet our needs. We're excited to have Southeast Market GR and looking forward to the growth of that. And I think, it doesn't have to be limited to just one. I think our communities, we need to continue to scale and grow in there. A couple other comments from Diane Rayer. Thank you for this session. Policy that supports access to local food. She says, yes, edible spaces or green spaces in every open lot. Bigger food forests and other places have already done this. I think we kind of spoke to Seattle and Chicago, some areas that are already doing this. Dennis O'Connell, all great ideas tonight to do right here in Grand Rapids. Thanks, Dennis. Shannon Abbott, when we are talking about healthy and sustainable food, what does that look like to you all in terms of going plant-based or vegan? I feel like it's so important, but access and costs have been issues. That's a big one. I don't know how far we can dive into that one tonight, but if someone wanted to speak to that one briefly, I'll go ahead and open up the floor. The question was, what does that look like as it relates to this conversation, but specifically for those individuals who are on a plant-based or vegan diet?
I would say it's going to look more like you prepping instead of buying items that are already made. It's possible to do it low cost. It's just going to take more prep for you.
All right, thanks. We have Kim Douglas. She says she's learning to grow, I'm going to mess this word up, aeroponically, and she's interested in exploring whether local government or faith communities might donate space to create more indoor community gardens for non-growing season. Tamika, who is also a member of our executive committee, made a comment as it relates to our kitchen table. There are community gardens on the southeast and northwest side of GR. Near Fuller and Franklin, and that these ideas are already in motion. So that kind of speaks to what Crystal spoke to about just knowing what's already there. And
yes, and it takes many hands to do the work. So it's not so much about recreating the wheel. Shout out to everyone who's already been doing the work, who's already been laying the path. It's great that they're doing it. It takes many hands. We don't need new gloves. We just need more hands to keep the wheel rolling.
There you go.
Big up to our kitchen table, all the community gardens that already exist, places who have filled in the gap, like Baxter Community Center. All those places are great, and they are necessary. They have been here, and we need more people. We need everybody. This is everybody's issue. Everybody needs a healthy meal. Everybody needs food to sustain life. So everybody needs to get involved. We all have to have our hands on this to make it work.
Yeah, and I would just add to that too is it's again, I think a big part of this is awareness. So even though these things exist, I think probably a super majority of folks in the communities that we're talking about, they're not aware of it, right? And then also what I would say too to that is when I think about our kitchen table is doing great work. And so you know, they have a Southeast Farmers Market, right? But how do we take that, our kitchen table, Southeast Farmer Market, and create the same model that the Fulton Street Farmers Market has right in our community? You know, because oftentimes and I'll just be honest, a lot of Black folks and other brown folks are not going to Fulton Street Market because they don't see that as a place for them. They think it's just a place where buppies and yuppies come in on the weekend and shop, because that's kind of the appearance that it gives. Let's be real. And so you know, you ain't gonna have Nanisha from the hood saying, "Let me go over here and get some double up bucks." And that's not what she's thinking. Because when she rides by, it just looks like this place isn't really for me. You know, I may see a few spottings of some Black and brown folks in there. And I've had this a very honest conversation multiple times with the Fulton Street Farmers Market and how they market to communities of color. I mean, you have a fence line community right next to you, but you don't do a real great job at marketing to that community and pulling that community in. So I know some of these things exist, but I think it's about raising the level of awareness. And then also, how do we scale a Southeast Farmers Market? Like, I would think, you think about King Park, I think that's like 10 acres of land. You know, to me, somewhere on that property, it could be a beautiful pavilion put up, for the Southeast Farmers Market. Why do we always have to have set up in the parking lot to sell our goods?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's fundamentally something is not right about that, right? So, the structure that they just built at King Park, which is probably a 10 by 15 little canopy where people can sit, how about putting, some other stalls along there somewhere to say, okay, we're going to build this space out to support the farmers market, the Southeast Farmers Market, right? Or retrofit the space that they already have there, which is the lodge on some level, So anyway, those are my thoughts, but yeah.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about awareness, but representation is the key to awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we get new faces and we're the only one. I know when I was going to school for horticulture, I was the only Black student. I was the first Black student to get a master's degree out of that school's program.
Mm-hmm.
So representation is everything. We need to see ourselves to know that we have a place there, period.
And one thing I wanted to mention about the Southeast area farmers market is that market is really catering to Black and brown vendors. And we have seen a lot of land as far as over the past several years, decades. There's not a lot of brown and Black. We don't have as much access to land. We have a harder time maintaining our land and having access to land. So I'd be remiss if I didn't speak into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole other issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to talk about land tax and land reparation. That's a whole other webinar.
Right.
But it's all connected. So.
No, you hit it right on the head, Alita. There's a whole nother layer to this that we haven't even touched on yet. And it's already 7:02. I'd like to just keep this conversation going all night, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. What I'd like to do next, if we could, I want to bring on Janelle Van Der Griff, who's with the Essential Needs Task Force, just to kind of give her the floor for a couple minutes so we can be aware about what their work is going to entail and how community can be involved. And then from there, I want to go back to the panel for any closing comments. For all of the guests and panelists who joined on today, if we were unable to address your questions or your comments, please email us at info@naacpgr.com. Again, that's info@naacpgr.com. And I'll put it on the screen here shortly, and we can address these questions at another session. But what I'd like to do now, I want to go ahead and bring on Janelle, who is with the Essential Needs Task Force, and she'll talk to us a little bit about her position and the work that they are going to be engaged in. Just a moment.
Hi, Kareem. Thanks so much for having me and giving me a second to talk a little bit about the work that we're a part of. So you had kind of mentioned the work that we will be a part of. So the Kent County Food Policy Council isn't fully formed yet. We're in the process of doing that right now. So what a food policy council does is it brings citizens, organizations, agencies, and businesses together to strengthen and grow a good food system. And a good food system, according to the Michigan Good Food Charter, is healthy, fair, affordable, and green. So that's very much in line with the theme of the session today. It's been great to listen in. So I was hoping, Kareem, you wouldn't mind sharing. I tried to put something in the chat, but couldn't. Maybe you already did. But right now, if there are ideas folks have about policies that should be changed in Kent County around food, we know that there are many that need to be. I like the idea of a comprehensive food security policy for Kent County. What would that look like for a group like ours to advocate for that once we're formed? So the council itself will have representation from all the different sectors around food. So business, nonprofit, agriculture, government, health, and education, as well as resident representation as well. So knowing that we all have a part to play in the food system, and how do we create a food system that better represents all of our needs. So thanks for this moment to chat. I know this is the end of your time. Would love to share more, or would love for you to be a part of our work. If Kareem is able to share the chat I put in the private chat to the comments, just with a sign up to our newsletter. Our meetings will be public, and there will be a way for you to be a part of it if you would like. So thanks for this time.
And thank you again, Janelle. I know it was really brief, but we're definitely interested in learning more about this council, and how community can be a part of it. I'm going to go ahead and place the link that Janelle was just speaking of. I'm going to go ahead and place that in the comments now. But thank you very much, Janelle, for joining, and we definitely look forward to working with you further in this space.
Thanks.
All right. And again, I'm going to go ahead and place that link in the.
So I think what Kareem was saying is he'll place that in the link in the chat, right?
There you go. I was going to say, as we prepare, as I'm putting this link in the comments, should we go ahead and kind of just pass the mic around the floor and allow everyone to give their closing comments? We'll just go on a roll. Why don't we start with you, Eleanor?
I want to uplift what David put in the comments on things we didn't even get a chance to talk about. We're talking about like the soil. We're talking about food waste and composting. If y'all haven't heard about wormies, get connected. Y'all can start recycling food. There's just so many layers to, we were just talking in the way that we engage and eat food and the way that we purchase. And there's just so many layers to kind of the food spectrum. So again, homework, y'all, take little steps towards wanting to learn and engage with our farmers, wanting to engage and learn about how to grow your own food, and just connect with one of us. I'm sure we're all open to continued conversation at any point. And also sign up for the newsletter for the Food Policy Council. Again, I'm on the forming team. It's pretty fantastic. I'm really excited. It's starting very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Alita.
So grateful to have been invited to this today. I'm just so happy that we're having these conversations, a beginning conversation to so many other topics that really deserve our time and attention. But I encourage everyone to check out some of the work that we're doing at Southeast Market, southeastmarketgr.com. Also, if you're interested in getting involved with some local policy, right now the Urban Agriculture Committee is doing that work. So, and that's open to the public as well.
And go ahead, Crystal.
All right. I am thankful for this time as well. I'm actually jumping in for Matt, who was not able to be with us for the panel or any part of this, but we are thankful for him. I just enjoy helping the community around food. I do a lot with a lot of different groups and committees, and I sit on a couple of boards. And usually I'm in the background. You won't see me, but I am open to talking to anyone who would like further information. I'm at GVSU. I'm on Facebook. You can find me, or we can chat about anything that you like around food.
Thank you so much, Crystal. President Jackson.
Yeah, I would say let's verify that the link is working. When I clicked on it or try to post it, it says it may be invalid, and that could just be on my end. But the other thing I would say, this conversation, quite honestly, deserves a part 2. And, because I think too, you know, some of this stuff is we got to think about the people who are not familiar. They don't even have a clue when it comes to this conversation, right? So that's the thing. You know, when I say awareness, always follow three things. When we talking, you know, healthcare: awareness, education, and then literacy, right? And so I think this definitely deserves a part two at some point. I'm just looking at all of the things, soil, and all of these things that I think it was David or had mentioned in the intersection between all of these different things. But I don't think we have to get into the weeds, but I think we have to distill it down to a level where it makes sense for people. And it makes sense to the people who need it the most, right? And so when you got to distill it down, and you got to take it's almost sometimes you have to take baby steps, right? And one of the things that, you know, I often say when it comes to, you know, like low hanging fruit is, I'm not going to go off into another tangent, but, you know, just recycling, right? But do you know how hard that is for some people to recycle? It really is. And we think it shouldn't be, but it really is, because there are some things that you can't recycle that you think you might can, you know, but so it's just so I think this deserves a part two at some point. And it will be really interesting if we can pull together with this new King County Food Policy Council, once we can get in person or something, or even later in the year, a down and dirty, mini conference type of a deal, where we talk about this subject. If at some point we can get in person, or it might have to be virtual. Anyway, so that's all I have to say. I want to thank you all for joining in.
And Janelle, any closing comments from you? I know you joined late, but thank you so much for joining as well. Any closing comments?
Well, I love that idea of having some sort of mini conference. So let's plan on it sometime. And I would love to be a part of the conversation further too. And I think definitely talking about all the ways in which, if we want a fair system, we need a green food system, how we need to find that synergy between all of those things. So that's definitely something that we're working on, and certainly lots of opportunities to work together. And I'm excited about that.
All right. Well, again, it is 7:13. I want to let everyone go and enjoy their evenings. I want to thank everyone, all of my panelists, specifically for taking out the time to be engaged in this. I know all of us have busy schedules. For you to take out the time of your evening, it means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to our viewers. So thank you all for giving up your time and energy to be engaged in this. I want to say thank you to all of our viewers for being a part of this long overdue conversation. Like President Jackson said, this will be the first of many. This series was meant to be a quarterly web series, just because we didn't really know, what the involvement would look like. But we'll have to go back to the drawing board and determine if we want to host this more frequently. But we'll definitely be bringing you a part two, and there'll be more to come from this initiative. So again, thank you everyone for joining, and have a blessed evening. And good night.
Thank you.